live. So Jean-Philippe and I, we are excited because we are going to do our podcast on the book Super Communicator. Great book. And hmm,
It's already the end.
yeah. We are finishing chapter 7, so meaning that there's not a lot of content after that, so maybe 3 podcasts. We'll
Yeah,
see.
maybe 1 2 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. So we are going to talk about something that seems simple, but it's actually very difficult. So how can we create a safe space when we have, tough discussion to have impossible conversation? We're gonna deep into the story, and we're gonna end that story. Remember, we started at the first podcast of when we begin the chapter 7 about what happens at Netflix, and this is a crazy company for me. You know what? I would never work there.
Me too. Never.
So we're gonna see how Netflix went through that major crisis and how they learn to have conversation about sensitive topics without things exploding. So we're going to see how we can apply these lessons in our MLM. And because in our team we have sometimes difficult conversation to have, so we don't know how to approach people and without hurting them, so we are going to try to give you the best advice for those tough conversation.
Yes. So just before we get into our subject, I want to remind you a little bit about the story of what happened at Netflix. So if you guys remember in Netflix work environment, there is one rule of there is no rule. Okay, so like everybody must speak out. They must say things that they are not comfortable with, not like on which they disagree. So what did happen at some point is when one of the VP actually explained during a conference that they were about to have like a show on the platform that was using like very harsh vocabulary and like way to express himself, that actually they will have like a lot of complaints and all of that, and even use like the N word in the meeting. And starting from that point, the culture of speaking out and being able to express themselves has been really, really hard. And even like one of that VP has actually been fired from Netflix. And since that moment, it was hard to continue with that culture of everybody must speak out, because they didn't know what they were able like to speak about, especially hard conversation about like racism, politics, orientation, and all of that. So here is the continuation of that story. So 4 months after that VP, Jonathan Friedland, has been fired, okay, Netflix is still in the middle of the crisis. So everyone say that they hate discrimination and everybody wants to work into a fair workplace, but just saying that, okay, is not enough. So they have been hired a new VP, Verma Myers. So she has been hired to be a VP of inclusion. So like she had one mission, it's to help Netflix have those difficult conversations without becoming toxic. Okay, but the problem is that the Netflix culture is designed to be fast and flexible, which means that people are encouraged to speak quickly, okay, and act quickly and challenge anything and everything. So you understand that what is happening most of the times is that people are doing, acting, and saying before even thinking or take just a few minutes of analysis. So what they discover is that operate a little closer to the edge of chaos. This is how they actually been seeing the culture of the company. But for sensitive topics like racism, prejudice, identity, sexual orientation, like all of that, okay, this culture can be disastrous because people need to think and we don't know how people will interpret it on the other side. So one employee even said like no one at Netflix knew how to discuss those subjects without becoming like nuclear, okay, and like having huge impact. And the worst part is that since Friedland, okay, that VP that was fired, okay, no one knew where the red line was, like what you can cross, what you can say without being offending to other people. So people just stopped talking about it. But what happened is that in that culture of everything should be said, then the opposite, the silence at that moment became one of the biggest problems.
Yeah. So that new VP, so she understand that she have a big job to do, and her and her team understand that we need rules, okay? Because you cannot say anything that you have in your mind, and that was the culture at Netflix. So you can do say anything, okay? So she said, okay, we need rules, but at Netflix, rules are forbidden. So she said, okay, we're gonna call them guidelines. So guidelines create, you know, things that you can do or you cannot do. Okay, so this is, the red line, and okay, you have to stop before the red line. And we are going to share with you the 9 guidelines that she established, and it's good because you know what, we can be inspired by those guidelines in our MLM when we have tough discussion. So we are going to refer to those guidelines. Okay, so number one, um, start by talking about the guideline. So that reminds me, you know what? In at school, a lot of teacher they discuss the guideline with the kids. Okay, because if we want to have a respect in our classroom, so what should be the guideline? And they are going to make those guidelines, and they're going to experiment, and they're going to say, oh no, yes, we need to add this. And okay, so you have to talk about those guidelines before even starting the conversation. We have to establish the rule, so what is going to be acceptable and what is not. Okay, why it's important? It's because in the Netflix culture, okay, everyone is encouraged to speak quickly, to say what they have on their mind, and to be radically honest. They You can challenge anyone. Okay, so people don't know where is the limit. So she said, okay, we have to set some limits, and we are going to talk about those guidelines. Okay, of course, because there's no guideline at Netflix, so she have to install this. Okay, number two, she said, okay, we have to acknowledge the discomfort, because she have to, when we are going to have a tough discussion. Okay, so you have to say out loud. Okay, it could be hard what we are going to discuss. Okay, but you know what, if we are uncomfortable, sometimes you are going to be silent, sometimes you don't want to talk, sometimes you are going to want to change subject. Okay, but you know what, we have to stay in the subject. And of course, it's going to be sometime we're going to feel the discomfort, but we have to continue, and we are not pretending that it's not happening. Okay, because if you are going to talk about race, if you have to talk about identity, how you see the world, sometimes it could be tough. Okay, so you have to acknowledge the discomfort. Number three, she said, we have to accept mistake. So the goal, it's not the perfection, so it's curiosity and understanding. So when you are going to talk, sometimes you're going to say something, and it's not the way, sometimes it's too late to say, oh my god.
Yeah. You have made a faux pas.
Yeah. Okay, you don't you need to eat your words. Okay, so it's too late. Okay, so you have to accept that sometimes you're gonna say something, and it's not the way that you would love to rephrase it, but it's too late. You said it. Okay, so this is important. And you are going to do mistake. Okay, so we have to accept that our mistake. Guideline number 4: the goal is to share our experience, not to convince. You have to you have to understand that you are not there to win your point. Okay, you're not here to win a battle. Okay, so this is a discussion. Okay, so you are not here to convince someone. Okay, so you she has her own idea, so we are going to discuss, and the goal, it's not that she's going to decide, okay, yes, I'm going to think like you. Okay. No, it's sharing. Okay. And this is a crucial distinction, because when we try to convince, we put the other person on the defensive. We saw it with the gun experience. Okay. If we say we are going to talk about polarized subject, of course, we're going to stay in our trench and we don't want to change our mind. Okay. But if it's a discussion, okay, so we can evolve, we can understand what the other person live, and that way she's not going to be on the defensive, and we create that way a safe space that for discussion.
So I will continue with the following guidelines. Guidelines number 5: no blame, no shame, no attack. So we're not there to judge, we're there to listen. And it is so essential because when you got into the shame part or the blaming part, it will create that identity threat. You remember, when you assign a group, a stereotype to somebody, or you put them into a group or an identity that they did not choose, actually it's very dangerous because they feel some blame, they feel shame, they feel attacked. And when they do feel attacked, unfortunately, it's the end. They just shut down. Okay. But remember, if at some point you get to, like, let's say that you have shame or blame somebody, you have made mistakes. It's to acknowledge them into like the discussion that will help you continue, okay, dig deep into the emotion that are taking place. Guideline number 6: talk about your own experience. Don't, because when you talk about your own experience, you're avoiding generalization. So you're talking about yourself, about what you just live, okay? And without spending time describing what other things or like what other will say, or because when you start to talk about everyone, you're making a generalization, and unfortunately, okay, people can feel attacked. It's an identity threat. So we don't say people your age don't understand. Okay, you say when I started, I didn't understand what like the business was or how it works, or I've learned through my experience. So it's very different. Is that bringing back that experience really to yourself, using the I instead of using the you that feel like an accusation. Guideline number 7: confidentiality. Okay, what's said in the room stays in the room. Okay, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Okay, so exactly the same. What I mean by that is that sometimes people are afraid that their words will be repeated. Okay, so they won't speak, they won't open up. So they gotta feel really that you're there to listen to them, and that those problem, okay, stay between both of you, and you are there for each other, and that you won't go like everywhere and just like gossip about what just happened. Guideline number 8: respect. Okay, so even if you guys disagree, you gotta respect the other person, because here it's the respect to be heard. So you ever like heard that, like agree to disagree? Well, here it is. Okay, agree to disagree. So it's the foundation of a conversation. So if we don't respect the other person, if we don't respect their opinion, if we don't respect, okay, what they are bring to the table, unfortunately, we can understand them, because we feel like we have to convince them that we are better. And as Sylvain said earlier, we're not there to convince, we're there to listen, because when you listen, it's really when you can feel what the other person is living, so you can offer your help in a better way. And finally, guideline number 9, the right to take a pause. So obviously, this won't necessarily happen in every conversation. We're really talking about difficult conversation. So you get to meet somebody that has done somebody that they should not done. They had like maybe made a big mistakes, or like you had a situation where you guys like fight, okay, with like arguments and all of that. So sometimes the discussion can become really difficult. So you have the right to say, okay, let's just take a pause. Maybe you had like an argument with your partner, okay, and at some point you say, let's just take a pause, okay, breathe, and then get back to the discussion. So discomfort is normal, okay, but when you feel pain or when like you get back to some trauma, it's a signal to stop, okay. And sometimes we say, oh, we're there to have that discussion, we need to finish it. Well, sometimes it can like happen in the discussion that, okay, that moment that you had blocked for that discussion is there, it needs to be continued at another moment. So those are the 9 guidelines that are kind of obvious, let's say. Okay, it's in French we say gros bon sens, so it makes sense, but it actually can help and change everything that you're about to say, the way you will say it, and understand that in those conversations we make mistakes. We are there to listen to each other.
Yeah. So she said, okay, we're gonna meet all the people at Netflix. Okay. So she established the 9 guidelines. She explained the guideline. And you know what? At the beginning, there's a few people showing to those workshop, okay, because they don't know what to expect, they don't know if they are going to be judged. So she start with a small group, let's say 7 people, and then 10, okay, and it took times, and after that sometimes she had meeting with more than 50 persons. So it took time to build the trust after that crisis. So she start her the all workshop with by sharing her own mistakes. Okay, she tell sometimes how she misgender people. Okay, how she told a trans friend that the pronouns they or them might not be a good idea. Okay, so sometimes she speak, let's say, something in her mind, and she realized, oh no, it's not good. One day on the plane, she heard the voice of female pilot during turbulence, and she thought, "Oh, I hope she knows how to drive." But she realized that, you know what? She have never doubted a male pilot. If the male pilots say, "Okay, we have turbulence," she's not going to think about it. But because she's a woman, she think, "Oh, I hope she know how to drive." So she realized that she had never doubt, okay, a male, and she didn't know why she had that bias in her head, okay, because it's there, it's something that we are sometimes we have inside us, okay. So I remember my father was joking about woman driving, okay, so we are not doing those kind of joke anymore, but we can urge, let's say, our uncle or okay. So but this is something that it's related to identity, okay. Then she asked participants, so she started by creating that safe space, okay, sharing something that she is doing some mistake, okay, so that opens the door. Then she asked people to share mistake too, that a moment that they maybe exclude someone or they felt excluded, like she just explained. And some people talk about their identity, about when you are gay, okay. Other people talk about the race, okay. So they had so many people, they express themselves, okay. And this is how, because it's a safe space, so people, they can explain how they feel, and they feel heard by the other people, and it's a great way to learn from other people.
Yes. And by doing that, by starting the conversation, like share her own experience, showing like her own mistakes, that the safe space was created so they can get a little bit deeper into the conversation and talk about what is happening in Netflix. So one of the collaborator, like Wade Davis, so he worked with her. So he has like a very specific background, something interesting that he can bring to the table. He's a former NFL player. He's gay. He's black. He had lived poor when he was young, and he was like leading the workshop with the executive. So by that status that he shared, so he was able like to continue the conversation. So he asked them, the people there working at Netflix, what are the requirements for working at Netflix? How do you know someone meets them? So a lot of people thought that the candidate that they suggest like wasn't choose. They didn't understand why. So they did realize that at some point, oh, do we have those criteria? Okay. And like an executive, like a designer, he answered, well, I look for people who study at school like RESD or Parson or have experience, at Apple or Facebook. Then actually he stopped and he said, oh, I'm actually describing myself. I'm defining the own criteria here, and it's me. So realize that the criteria wasn't like said out loud, but the only way that he was like judging them is by his own experience and his own background. So he said, oh, finally, I'm not looking for diversity. I'm not looking for inclusion because I'm talking about myself. So for him, he realized that it was a mistake and it was a bias. So this wouldn't have happened if that safe space wasn't created at first by the collaborator and by the other VP that share its own experience at first.
Yes. Okay. So now we heard what Netflix did to put their own guidelines. But what in our MLM? Okay. So do we need that guideline, Jean-Philippe? How can we transpose those kind of guidelines? So of course, if we have to have a difficult conversation in our team, we have to create our own guideline. We have to just imagine. So yesterday we say, okay, you know what? Before a tough meeting, just pause, okay, and think about what it could happen. And if she react like this, how going are you going to react? And if she's going to react like this, how are you going to react? Okay, so sometimes if we prepare ourselves, we are better to react. So if we have to have a tough conversation, let's say with a consultant who is stagnating, okay, before starting, maybe we could say, okay, the goal of the conversation is to understand together what's blocking you. Okay, I am not here to judge you, and I'm here to hear you. Okay, and if you feel uncomfortable, tell me. Okay, we can take a pause. I'm here just to help. I'm going to share. Let's say she talk, and I can say, I want to share something with you, and not tell you what you should do. Okay, so can you allow me this? Okay, and we can say, okay, what you are going to say is going to stay between us. Okay, we are not going to tell anybody. Okay, it's a discussion, just you and me, and it's gonna be stay private. Okay, it seems basic, but when you just say out loud those kind of guidelines, so it's changed all the climate of the meeting.
Yes. And also it's for one-on-one meeting, but it's also for like team meeting. Okay. Because we know that more people that we have, new consultant, like those rule needs to be established over and over again. So it's the same like with team meeting. You can say you don't criticize someone who isn't here. We talk about our experience, not about like what other people should do. Okay. If you disagree, you say it with respect. You don't criticize publicly. Okay. So that can be done on like in your Facebook group, your Messenger group also, okay? So it's really important to establish those rules. And I'm pretty sure, Sylvain, it happened like in your Messenger group at some point, people like start criticizing like the company because yes, like the delay of the shipping was a bit longer. So you had to manage that. So it's really important to say that yes, like here we share, we don't judge, and criticism happens in private. So it's not complicated, but as usual, as we just said, it's here to create a safe space so people can feel that no matter what is happening or living or event, they got the right to share and the right to be heard. So what did happen at Netflix is actually by installing those guidelines, okay, no rules, but those guidelines, actually the climate change and the workspace change a lot. So like they realized after a couple months that 52% of women like compose the workspace, 45% of the senior leader were women, 50% employee like were from underrepresented group in the US, which is really rare for a tech company. It's rare, yes, in like Hollywood, like in the Silicon Valley, but by installing them, by living that crisis, and by taking action, they have been able like to change the face of the company, and people in the company felt it like in a way that they feel in a safe space. So what are
Jean-Philippe, in that new Netflix era, would you work there?
probably not. Good for them, but probably not for me. So, what are our takeaway from that podcast today? So, 5 lessons on what is important things that we've said today. So, number one, guidelines create a safe space. Okay, without clear rules, it's a difficult conversation can become toxic. So you gotta talk about those guidelines to create that safe space. Number two, lesson number two, start by sharing your own mistakes. And this is really the most important part. It shows that you are vulnerable. So by doing so, you're creating a safe space. And then after, people can realize, as the man from Netflix, that he has been hiring according to his background, that it was a mistake, but it was able to do so because they did it at first.
Lesson number three, the goal is not perfection. The goal is just to have that conversation and stay in the conversation. Lesson number four, even when we disagree, we can understand each other. That's the real goal. Okay. And number five, guidelines don't solve everything, but they allow to have a great conversation that otherwise we would not have that kind of conversation and talk about sensitive discussion. Okay, so this week in your team, create your own guidelines. So when you are going to have a discussion, so what is acceptable, what is not, how can we handle discomfort, okay, how are we going to share our experience. So the goal is not to eliminate disagreement, it's to create a safe space where we can talk about them. So thank you for joining us, and we are going to see you tomorrow with the podcast Jean-Philippe, Marie-Pierre, and Maria. Bye for now.